Hi and welcome to Carriageworks Masterclass in the state-of-the-art Smeg kitchen. Today we're with Palisa Anderson of Sydney's Chat Thai restaurants. She also started Boon Cafe and she runs Boon Lark Farm where she grows everything from 30 types of citrus to peanut butter fruit. My name is Lee Tran Lam. I write and podcast about food. I first met Palisa in 2015 at the screening of a food documentary where she snuck in some juice made with greens from her farm, and she handed a bottle of this tart, vibrant juice to me, a total stranger, sitting in the row behind her. Over the years, I've interviewed Palisa quite a few times, including on the topic of mackerel limes and how important they are to Thai cooking. So I feel it's really apt that today we're exploring all things sour.
Lee Tran, to this day, I don't understand why you would drink something that a stranger's given you.
But it led to this wonderful friendship and it led to us here today. So I think I made the right move.
Serendipitously, I think it has absolutely led us to this kitchen right now because, yeah, you're right. The backbone of our relationship has been defined by the flavour sour.
And we're going to explore the topic of sour flavours, bracing tart sour flavours through the things you're cooking today. So can you tell us the recipes you'll be demonstrating today?
Well, these are the three things that I've been making the most in the last couple of months, and one of them is the jaew, which is my universal sauce. It goes with literally everything, and again, the predominant flavours are sour. I'm also making a boiled lemon mackerel pasta.
Wow, is that very Thai?
No Thai, no origin of anything. It's just something that I was playing with, and I remember serving it to my kids and they're like, I think you have to do this one, Mum. So I'm doing it for them.
Great.
And then we're making a umami mochi cake. It's going to be glazed with a green tea icing and it just goes so well. The bitter tannins of the matcha and then the sourness of the plum in the sticky rice cake. I mean, and since we can't go to Japan, I think we're gonna bring kind of like the Thai Japan thing here.
Wow, this all sounds amazing. Should we get started?
Let's do it.
Tell us about this universal sauce. What's in it and then how do we make it?
So jaew is something that you will find everywhere in Thailand, no matter where you eat. Whether you're kind of like street side or in a fine dining restaurant, it's just one of those sauces that has some key ingredients that have a common thread, but depending on where you are in Thailand, it varies so much from like household to household. It's incredible because it's got so much flavour, but there's no fat to it at all. And that's a lot of Thai sauces. No fat, but like punch in your face flavour because the predominant flavours are sour and spicy with undertone currents of salty and sweet. The base of any good jaew, I think, has charred shallots, charred cherry tomatoes. The chili is also, we're going to blister. Galangal is actually part of the rice powder, dried chilies, very spicy. And then our sour elements, which is going to be the limes, the tamarind, and the garlic. Making the rice powder is a really crucial step to the sauce because we're going to blitz this. And what it does is it acts as a thickener, but it also acts like the perfume base.
Yeah, it's quite fragrant, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's got all these amazing aromats in it. And traditionally, it would be done slowly over a dying embered charcoal wok. Wow. And slow and slow. So I did this in my lovely Smeg oven, very, very slowly overnight. So the thing is, if you go too hard, the rice will burn and you'll have a black powder. Not so nice. So the aromats in that is the mackerel limes. Again, that's what you can smell, the citrusy aroma. And also the citronol from the lemongrass.
Right.
Again, like not inadvertently very sour as an ingredient, but it gives you that hint of
that nice note.
Yeah, tang. And then there is the galangal, which is what we call in Thai. It's not ginger, it's not turmeric. It's very, very hard to handle, actually. And at different maturity stages, it's good for different dishes. So in this, you want a hard aroma. So that means you want it as mature as possible. When you buy it, make sure it's like gone gnarly. It's not pink. When you get it at the pink stage, that's when you add it to things like tom yum soup, which is again another sour soup. So we chop that up really finely and then throw all the aromats in. And there's also pandan. If it's not come to color yet, you can do it on the stovetop to get it to brown a little bit more. And you've got to be really careful with rice because it burns really fast. And then you'll get an uneven kind of, some grains will be black or some grains. So just take it off before that happens. Normally I'd put it into the mortar and pestle, but since we've got that lovely handheld blender there, I will get you to do that for me.
Yes, okay, I will do that, thank you. Okay. How long does that have to go for?
You want a coarse sand texture.
Oh, you can really smell it. So, is this ready?
Perfect.
It smells really fragrant and lemongrassy, peppery.
It's there to add texture, but it's also there to thicken.
Right.
It does a dual purpose thing.
So we're going to pour this into this bowl and we'll set that aside, and then you want me to blitz some chili.
So this is dried bird's eye chili, super spicy. So don't rub your eyes afterwards. This is somewhat blitzed now, but I'm going to get you just to make that a little bit finer.
Okay.
Yeah. So we toasted this to make it more fragrant and for the oils to kind of come out from hiding. And then once it's cooled, that's when you give it a good whirl.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. So sour works so well with spice because it kind of helps to temper it. Yeah.
It's very potent once you lift the lid off. That's a real blast of chili powder on your face.
Yes, be careful, be aware that yes, mace is actually made from capsaicin, isn't it?
I can understand that, I can feel that.
All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to blister the cherry tomatoes. The whole objective of this is we're just going to cook them in their skin. So we're going to throw them just like that in there.
Straight in.
Yeah, keep these bits for your soup stock.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Don't throw anything away. Now, you can throw everything in, but it never cooks at the same rate. So I always go in terms of like how long something needs to be in there before it starts to char.
Yeah.
So always goes shallots, cherry tomatoes, or depending on the size of your garlic. Okay, so this.
Because these obviously are going to take a lot longer than the cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, the cherry tomatoes literally will take seconds. Right, so what we're going to do is every now and again we're just going to flick it around so it just kind of moves around the charred bits. The objective of charring them is one, you're cooking the kind of that very sharp kind of onion, garlic flavour out of it, so you're cooking that out, but you're also softening it because you're going to pound it in the mortar and pestle.
Right.
And you're bringing the sugars up. So it's going to be the counterbalance to the spice and the sour and also the saltiness from the fish sauce.
So when people think of sour flavours, they think of like really loud flavours, really like in-your-face flavours, like, you know, often we think of extremely sour things where you squint, your face makes involuntary expressions from extreme tartness. But you've got a really interesting range of sourness that you're working with. They're kind of pitched at different levels of sourness.
I think without sour, again, I really go back to this whole idea of it doesn't feel complete. Like for me, a meal doesn't feel rounded out. And that's, I think, what I've picked up in some of the best restaurants in the world, which I've eaten at. I feel like, for me anyway, what makes a chef a really good chef is somebody who understands how to use those flavours as a seasoning. So sometimes, mostly, you don't even know it's there. It's that undercurrent that balances everything out.
I feel like with sour, what it does is it makes the dish sing, right? It plays off, as you're saying, the saltiness. Or perhaps with chili, it kind of makes it a little easier to handle. So
it's the counterbalance. It's the counterbalance for so many dishes, I think, whether it's a savoury dish or a sweet dish. And maybe because, like, I don't know, as modern humans, we've evolved, our palates have evolved to want that. All right, so I've just chucked in the garlic now, and as you can see, the peel of the shallots they'll start to undress themselves. And the reason why you keep the peel on is, you see how it's kind of blistering? You don't want to blatantly kind of like be eating brown bits. So when we come to put this through the mortar and pestle, we just slowly kind of peel the burnt bits back. And also, it acts as a steamer. It acts as its own kind of empapillo, you know, like the
baking paper.
Yes, that's right.
It's nature's baking paper.
Yeah, pretty much. So there's no waste. So we're gonna just chuck in the chilies. I'll make it to my children's spice level.
Yeah, sure.
All right, if you want to just de-stem the cherry tomatoes and then just chuck it in.
Oh, chuck it all in. Okay.
Here.
That smells really good.
You're just going to give it a good shake. So we've just speared the shiitake mushrooms onto the lemongrass. Now you don't have to use the lemongrass, but you know, just to maximize the aromats, and since we've got the tops of the lemongrass here, we will do that. You always want to start with a blazing hot pan. Yeah, rule number 1, cooking with my mum. Wait till the pan gets hot. Okay, and then we add the oil on. So we're going to just turn the gas down a little bit now that the skillet is hot. We're just going to slowly kind of char it. We're not going to like kind of go crazy with our heat. Now you can get like a lid or something to hold it down, but I think you'll be all right. And get head down to get the char marks. And because lemongrass has quite a lot of moisture to it, it won't burn off so easily. If you're going to use a skewer, make sure you soak your skewer. Yeah, so it doesn't burn off. You know, when you lift it off at the end, it kind of always burns off. Now, we're just going to peel the really charred bits off. Don't really have to, but I kind of feel like you don't want black bits in your sauce.
So they're all kind of soft and roasted and caramelized,
yes. Oh, that smells so good.
Yeah.
And the sugars often kind of, that's what the black bits are really actually, just the burnt sugar.
So I guess you're going to have the sweetness from how everything's being caramelized, but then the kind of acid of the cherry tomatoes here.
Yes, that's right. And then we add the lime juice. So again, it's really important that we kind of chop everything to size. Otherwise, you'll have kind of like fibery bits. Bits that stick to your teeth.
Yeah.
Okay. The garlic kind of becomes like a paste almost. You can squeeze that out. This is like one of my all-time. I always have a jar of this in the fridge because I feel like you can eat this with anything, like eggs or, you know, any veggies or meat. All right, now I can see that's starting to smoke. Okay, so we've got our our charred ingredients now into the mortar and pestle. We're just going to kind of amalgamate it together by pounding it so that you're breaking the cell walls of the onion, the garlic and the chili. And we don't add the cherry tomatoes in yet because if you did this, there'll be cherry tomatoes flying everywhere. Yeah, do it in order of liquid. Before we were grilling in order of hardness. Okay, now. And now we just kind of like slowly bruise that, because if you were going to go hard here, you'd have cherry tomato seeds and juices flying around everywhere. Okay. So you're kind of just muddling at this stage. And you can see the sauce is coming together. I feel like so many cultures have a form of a sauce like this. Like this is, you know, not too unfamiliar to what moles, how moles are made, and you know, any other sauces that kind of blend together different aromats and ingredients. Right, so now, can you see this consistency?
Yeah.
It's kind of a bit gluggy, so we're going to loosen it up. And how we do that is I've just into the tamarind bowl, so rather than tamarind puree, we bought blocks of tamarind, and I like doing this because I can really control how much liquid I add to it. LT, can you pop that on there?
Yeah.
See how that really thickened up?
Yeah. So you just want the juice and not the big chunks,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. There's a lot of pectin in tamarind, and that's what you're seeing.
It's a bit jammy
Yes,
looking.
that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so you can just do it like that. And then, yeah, perfect. And then we're going to add the other seasoning ingredients. Some fish sauce. Okay, so this is coconut nectar sugar. So I'm using this in place of palm sugar, but essentially it's kind of the same thing.
Right.
When we talk about palm sugar, there's many ways to make palm sugar.
Yeah.
And one of them, and I've seen this, it's so beautiful, is when the palm fruit flowers,
Yeah.
they bundle up the flowers together and then they slowly snip the end of it. And then they
Right.
have a bucket, and it's very similar to tapping maple syrup, or something like that. And then they have a bucket at the bottom, and they catch the syrup
Wow.
that drips down from the flower bundle. And then each day they cut a little bit more, and the new sluices drip more sap into the bucket, and it ferments really fast. So in order for it not to ferment, they found that often nearby palm trees, there is another tree growing.
Wow.
And the bark is what stops the fermentation.
Huh.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so interesting.
Also always grows symbiotically. Anyway, so that's one thing I learned when I was in Thailand last time. Okay, so now the sauce is coming along. The last little bit is my lime. And then, to finish it off, this is the rice powder that we made earlier, and then a bit of the chili powder. That's enough. It's super spicy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the rice powder adds a bit of texture, but what else is
Yes.
it adding?
The aroma, right? The aromats, the texture, the aromat, it's the essence of the sauce, really. This is the shallots, and this is what we're going to use to finish off the sauce.
Can I ask you, with the macroot lime, the leaf has a different kind of sourness to the actual juice?
There's no like kind of acidity.
Yeah,
actually,
right.
to the leaves.
Yeah.
It's more the aromat.
Yeah.
The fruit itself is super, super duper sour, and we use that sometimes in soups and curries, especially in a very famous curry called gang tae po.
Isn't this your favourite curry?
Yes.
Yes.
We talked about this, haven't we? Yeah.
Well, this looks ready to me, but is it ready? Are you
It's
happy with
so
this?
ready. All right, let's plate.
Do you have tips on how to plate this well?
Grouping's always good, right? Like,
it's a good styling tip.
yeah. I'm just gonna use this, always like a bit of that fat is
Yeah,
just
nice.
always a little bit.
That's going to have a lot of flavour in it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna put it, I was gonna put it underneath, but I didn't want to kind of like overpower you with the sauce just in case it was a little bit too spicy. So I might just plate it up separately.
Yeah, okay.
Something green, and then and then you can just dust.
You can smell it when the toasted rice hits the
the heat.
grilled
Yeah.
mushrooms.
So
it
good,
really
isn't it?
activates those earthy aromas. So I'm going to get a big serve of this.
We've got a bit
sauce.
of everything there.
Yeah,
the
got
garlic,
everything.
the tomato.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in here, and I'm just going to like slather it on this mushroom. I definitely get the sourness. I think the chili kind of sweetens it and the tomato kind of sweetens it. I think it kind of softens that potential chili blast, right? The sourness kind of slows it down a little. But it adds a lot of depth to everything else that's going on.
The chili there is really just to warm your throat. It's just a tickle on the tongue, warm on the throat, and then it's gone.
Thanks for this. I feel like you nailed this dish. Tell us what's coming up next.
Well, this is just our starter, right? This is just kind of like snacky wine food or beer food. We're going into our mains next, and that is going to be the pasta with the boiled lemon and the mackerel.
Wow, I can't wait. So we've got everything ready for the pasta. Can you talk us through what we need to finish this dish?
Okay, so everything is already prepped and ready to go. I've got some peppers, charred and then peeled back like that. I think they'll sit in the fridge for weeks. Like I've had them in my fridge for about 6 weeks, and then before I've used them and they'll be fine. This is tomato confit. So again, cherry tomatoes, I've got them all over my garden. I just pick them whenever I've got a big enough bowl. I chuck them into a baking tray and just roast them down with garlic. Green olives, which I've just de-pitted and chopped up a little bit, and boiled lemons, which is the kind of the star of the dish, really. And all we've done is just boil it for half an hour to 45 minutes and then chopped it up. Some wine, whatever you've got in the fridge, kind of on the lighter side is better for this dish. And then with some white pepper, we've got our pasta, which you can make actually days in advance and just keep it well wrapped up in the fridge. You know, lazy Sunday afternoon, what shall I do? Need some pasta, chuck it in the fridge, have it ready for the week. And the fish, I've cured it with a bit of salt and stuck it in the sun. The ingredient that always needs a home and nobody really ever knows how to use it and what to put it in, celery leaves. I love celery leaves. And that's just going to finish off our dish. I've just pre-chopped some garlic and some shallots. Because the water always boils so slowly, we're going to put that on now.
All right.
So that when we get the sauce cooking and when we're rolling out the pasta, as soon as we roll the pasta out, it's just going to be dumped into the hot boiling water. Yeah, be liberal.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Right, so we're just going to turn that on. Again, get the skillet nice and hot. Now I'm going to do this in 2 phases because I'm going to do your dish with that fish.
Okay, great.
And I'll keep the fish for the rest of the crew. Just gonna give it a little nice glug of oil.
Boiled lemon, like, is this something you've been doing for a while, or is this accidental? How did you come across it?
Well, traditionally, you know, like there aren't any lemons. I think in traditional Thai cooking, there's always limes, right?
Yeah.
So there's always like dishes with like preserved or pickled limes in soups and things like that. And I love bitter food, but I love bitter and sour food. So it feels like kind of the best of both worlds, really. And Claudia Rodin, it's like, I remember reading a Guardian article about what her secret ingredients were. And she said boiled lemons. And I had just done some filming with Pete Gilmore where he made this beautiful lemon puree dressing. But he passed it through, like boil it, change the water, boil it to get the bitterness out.
Yeah.
But I'm just one of those kind of like, I guess you could say I'm a lazy cook, but I think actually I really like the flavour of things the way they are.
Yeah.
So I wanted to preserve some of that bitterness because when you combine it with other ingredients, I feel it really adds more depth and flavour to it. Okay, look at that.
Wow.
So this is what happens when you preserve it in the sun. It dries it out naturally so that when you do cook it, all that moisture's gone out of it, and so it doesn't kind of splutter everywhere, and you've got a beautiful crisp skin. And we don't have to cook it all the way through because it's going to go back into the sauce.
For someone who hasn't left their fish out in the sun, what would you recommend for a beginner trying to follow your lead?
Well, to preserve it, you can also just put it in the fridge, but uncovered. Put it on a baking tray, salt it lightly, and then just stick it in there, and you can leave it in there for 3 or 4 days. It won't go off because the salt's kind of pulled the moisture out of it, and you're just intensifying the flavour of the fish. And it works really well with fish that's a little bit more oily, a little bit more fatty. All right, so we're just straight into the oil. Okay. We're just going to cook the onions and the garlic out a little bit, and we're not going to add any more fat or liquid oil to it because, as you'll see, the cherry tomatoes here have quite a bit of oil in them, and we're going to tip the whole thing in. And at this stage, this is when you put in, again, another sour ingredient, capers and the leaves. And then olives, again, another sour flavour.
So are these more like accents to the dish, like sour accents?
I think, you know, the thing with things like olives, tomatoes, again, there's glutamate in it. So it kind of adds to the meatiness.
That umami taste,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So especially if you're going to make a vegetarian dish, I think these things really add to it. And then we just let that fry out a little bit because you want the capers to brown up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, pull out some of that moisture and crisp, not almost crisp up, but not quite crisp up. Okay. And then the lemons.
So the boiled lemons, I have to say, being a lazy person, I would not naturally preserve lemons because
it takes time.
It takes time. I can't be bothered to sterilize a jar. But I was actually shocked to learn how easy it was to use your boiled lemon method.
Look, I always say, I always think you should always wash your things well, right? And if you're washing your jars and things well, oftentimes you'll be using really hot water or a dishwasher. And, you know, dishwasher is a natural, it sterilizes it anyway. As long as you see it's covered in its liquid. So it's covered in, you know, the capsicum juices or the olive oil. You know, these things you can have in the back of your fridge where it's the coldest part of your fridge, and it will last there, I don't know, I've had stuff kind of marinating in there for months.
Yeah.
And sometimes years, actually.
Yeah. So the boiled lemon, you literally just boil a lemon for half an hour?
Yeah, that's it. And this works really well, in particular with ugly lemons.
Right.
You know, this is something that you do with ugly lemons because I feel like ugly lemons have a lot of character.
Yeah.
And often the rind is a bit kind of thicker, and it works well with if you've underpicked a lemon or if you've bought some lemons and it's got no juice in it, you know. And so what you do is just chuck it into a pot of boiling water or its friends into a pot of boiling water, and you don't even have to add salt or anything to it. It's just literally water and lemons. And then I like to drink the lemon water.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, as a tea. It's super bitter, but again, you know, I kind of really sometimes crave those flavors. Okay, can you see now that even the peel of the lemon's starting to caramelize?
Nice, yeah.
But you can see, so the capers are starting to fry up and the olives. So you want that kind of mallard caramelization to happen before you add the liquid ingredients to it. Okay, so the tomatoes have gone in now that you can kind of start to see. I always use the lemon peel as the indicator. Once that starts to caramelize, that's when you want to add the other liquid ingredients to it.
Yeah, everything's browning really nicely.
Yeah. Right. And the peppers. And they're all kind of you don't have to kind of cut them too fine because they will start to break down a little bit. You don't want it to be too fine because you do want a little bit of the chunks in it still. Right, and then we'll tip some of that liquid in because that liquid that's the sugar, right? So everything has to have balance, right? So we've got the sour, we've got the salty from the capers and the olives, and also the fish, and then the sweetness from the peppers and the tomatoes. And now our other sour ingredient. Again, you can use any wine you've got left over in your fridge, as long as provided it's not too on the richer red side. And I'm always really generous when I cook with wine because I feel I like drinking wine, but I love the way it helps transform food. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to take some time now to cook out. So this is the sauce. We'll keep a glass to drink.
Yeah, sure, we'll toast later. So as a sour element, does that just add a depth to the dish?
I think what it does is it pulls everything together.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the rug in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're going to just make sure that's all well mixed up. And then I'm going to take some of it out for your serve.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah. So like there's, you know, some Italian, some Spanish flavor, some Middle Eastern, and a bit of an Asian thing going on with that. But you know, like this is where I find like, I don't feel like food needs to be defined by certain ethnicity or, you know, region or whatever. Like this is ingredients that have come from the land close to where I live. I've grown some of it. And so it's like, it's Australian, no matter what you kind of define it as. So while that's going, I'm just going to...
But in terms of like what people have in their home, this is a pretty versatile dish, right?
You can use canned fish.
Right.
You can use mushrooms. You can use anything you've got.
Great.
All right. Okay, now that's kind of, I'm gonna just turn the heat down so that it's just going to just simmer away, and then we're gonna roll the pasta. Okay, so we're just about to roll out the pasta. This has just been sitting at room temperature for half an hour. So we're just going to do it in fours. All right, there we go. What's your favorite pasta shape?
You know, I discovered one recently I'd never heard of called jaew, which apparently translates to lily blossoms.
Is that a traditional shape?
I think so. Yeah,
okay, so again, do you normally roll out pasta? Have you rolled out pasta before?
Not a pasta roller.
Okay, so with rolling pasta dough, it's important that we start always with 0.
The setting is 0 when you say
always,
0.
Yeah. And then we roll it through a couple of times. You can kind of like, you know, fold it over like this and like that and pass it through again. And then we move it. We move the dial up a little bit at a time. And then you don't want to make sure that your pasta is well floured, otherwise it will start to stick. I like to make my pasta out of duck eggs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I feel like it's just a little bit luxurious. You know, there's a little bit more fat to the yolk, and the color it gives is really nice. Okay, so I'm not going to make it too thin. I think I've just done it to, okay, that was 5. I'm just going to get to 6, and then, do you like thick pasta or thin pasta?
I love all kinds of pasta, to be honest.
Me too.
But obviously the thickness or the thinness that also relates to the kind of sauce you want to serve it with, right?
Okay, so now we've got and just going to cut an inch width. Like honestly, it's not a science. When it's in there, it all looks about the same size. And again, remember, this is like a midnight, it can be a midnight dish, but it's also a very good midweek dish. So, you know, you don't have to be super, like, you know, get your ruler out to measure out the exact width or anything. If it's all relatively around the same width, it cooks the same time, and then, because the thickness is all the same. Just turn the heat up.
Yeah.
And literally, it's going to take 2 seconds. You want some of that pasta water in there. Okay, it just helps thicken everything.
Yes.
All right. And normally, I guess, you know, I would put a lot more noodles in there. But hey, you know, I'm more sauce to pasta ratio. I know it's supposed to be the other way around, but it's probably the Asian in me. I want the sauce.
Are these celery leaves you chopped up earlier?
Yes, that's right, yep. So we just rough chop, just to finish it off. I think I would. More on yours. Okay, nice.
I don't think many people know what to do with celery leaves. So what kind of flavour does it add to the pasta?
Well, see, this is the thing. Like when you use celery leaves as a finishing herb, it doesn't make it taste like, you know, like it doesn't permeate so much the dish. I think it's just, especially when it's cooked down, it kind of like acts like parsley in a way.
It looks like parsley, actually.
It's the same family. It's in the umbral family. Same parsley. Sorry, same family as like coriander and things like that. But it just gives it a nice kind of herby.
A little green hit.
Yeah, and I love herbs. I just like, I'd put in 10 times more than that normally at home. All right, LT.
Shall we plate it up?
Yes.
Here we go.
Oh. Sometimes you just need some pasta. You know, that's most nights for me. And I didn't have to season it because everything else, like, you know, there's the salt from the capers, the salt from the olives. Start with that. And again, you can use any herb really.
It is a real clean out the fridge kind of dish, isn't it? Oh, thank you. Oh, yum.
Good?
I like the mix with the capsicum, like the sweetness, and then you kind of get that hum of the lemon, and yeah, that little salty hit of the capers and the olives. Like there's so much going on, and it all mixes together really well, really harmoniously.
It's just tasty.
It's very tasty, yeah.
And I think the sourness keeps you going back for more.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's finish eating this and let's roll on to dessert.
My favourite course.
So we're on to the last dish of today, which is dessert, so it's the best part. And we are going to learn about Palisa's umami mochi cake with matcha glaze. So tell us what is in it.
So, as all mochi normally starts with rice, I've milled some sticky rice to make a sticky rice flour. And then, so there's a couple of different sweeteners. So we're going to use coconut nectar as well as some caster sugar. Now this whole idea of this cake came from a really great bakery cafe in LA called Republic, and they've got a brilliant baker owner there called Marguerite Mansky, and she is one of the most kind of talented bakers around, I think. This cake is a riff off the cake she has on her counter and in her recipe book. I've just changed a lot of the quantities, but I've also changed what's in it. So rather than, I think she used raspberries, I'm going to use umami because I love umami, and umami and rice is just a perfect pairing really. And rather than raspberries, I'm using the mulberries. So there's 2 sour elements to this, but the 2 sour elements counteract the bitter matcha. And I love the bitter because the bitter is also counteracting the sweetness. So this is an all-day cake. This is not a cake that you only have for dessert. Forget about that. Cake is like, a good cake is supposed to be an all-day thing.
You can enjoy it 24/7. Can I just backtrack? If people, you know, people don't have to mill their own rice flour for this, right?
Look, rice is actually one of those grains that it's actually the easiest thing to mill. You can do it in your food processor, but you can also do it in like a handheld situation like what we used before. However, you can buy it as a flour already milled. Just make sure you get the glutinous rice and not just the plain rice flour, because it will give you a completely different texture if you only use just the rice and not the glutinous rice flour. This is a very easy cake. You just dump everything together, give it a good whisk, and then make sure everything's incorporated, bake it. Now, what I'm baking it in is slightly different though. I love using the copper cake pan because when I serve the cake, I don't actually serve it upside down. I serve it this way. Why do you reckon that is?
I have no idea.
More icing to cake ratio,
great,
of course.
Great.
Right?
So more of the matcha glaze.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And it holds. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going just to make the cake now. So that's just sticky rice flour, a little bit of the baking powder, so it's 1.5 teaspoons. Now I'm a big fan of putting salt in pretty much anything. So it's just 1 teaspoon of salt, and this is just 100 grams of caster sugar. Now I made one earlier, so I split the vanilla bean and just stuck it in the sugar just to kind of give it a little bit of a extra vanilla.
scent.
Yeah, and like, you know, you can use vanilla paste or vanilla essence or whatever, but actually, I'm like, why use that when you can use the real thing? All right, so this is just the coconut nectar. Just going to scrape the extra vanilla bean in there too. So there's a bit of coconut milk, there's a bit of coconut cream. And again, this is a recipe I've changed so that you don't end up with half a can of coconut milk in your fridge that you don't know what you're gonna do with. So this uses this is a conventional standard can that you can get from the supermarket. And again, that was 200 mils of coconut cream, which you can get it's like a small popper size.
All right, so the butter's been there for a very short time, like maybe
A couple of seconds.
Yeah, not very long.
And it doesn't have to melt all the way through, because if you just sit it there and you've still got some solid bits, it will keep melting. Okay, so we're just going to you can put more or less. I found the sweet spot at 60 grams, which is not quite entirely the whole sachet, but I think if you use too much, it can be a bit overpowering. At 60 grams, you know something's there. You don't know quite whether or not it's umeboshi. And I think your guests, or whoever's going to eat this cake, will be pleasantly surprised to learn that it is a pickled plum.
I guess also because, you know, my experience of having umeboshi is often in a savory context.
That's
like
right.
having it with congee, or like getting onigiri from like a Japanese convenience store where you have the rice, you know, that triangular rice ball,
yeah.
and right in the middle is that like
Umeboshi.
pickled, you know, that very tart pickled plum that, you know, your mouth puckers just thinking about how tart and bright it is.
And when you think about it, it's kind of supposed to be like the thing that ends your meal, right? So it is kind of like their dessert, like it is a dessert. It serves that purpose. However, like, I just feel, when I thought about wanting to eat the traditional mochi that I remember eating in Japan, there was a time of the year when it was sakura leaves, or sakura petals, which is the pickled flower.
Cherry blossoms.
Cherry blossom, either the leaves or the petals, and you'd get it on top of your sweet mochi, right? And that's what I really wanted, but you know, can't really find cherry blossoms anywhere near up in the northern rivers. So I've just popped 2 duck eggs in there. You can use 2 chicken eggs and an extra yolk. I'm just gonna put the butter in now. I don't ever remember eating a baked sticky rice cake as a kid. Although I'm pretty sure most of the time sticky rice cakes are steamed. So even in Japan, I don't think there's not really a tradition of baking rice as a flour. Although I'm sure it does happen. But I like the butter in there, because even though you can easily make this a dairy-free cake by using coconut oil, but I kind of like butter. I like the butter. And not that you taste it necessarily so much, but it kind of gives it a nice, and also I've used the cultured butter, so it gives it a nice lactic tang. I'm just going to give the copper pan, a quick little swipe of butter. No fancy napkins here. My hands are clean, I promise. Okay, so liberally, make sure, because then that way it can come out of the pan really easily. All right, and we're just going to, shall we put it in the oven?
Great.
Okay, so it looks like it's very full. It is. It will rise, but it will drop back down, like a bit of like a souffle. So the cake's gone into the oven at 180, and it depends on like how hot your oven is, but it should go roughly about an hour, 10 minutes, an hour, 15 minutes. Halfway through, no matter what oven it is, I always turn it around so that the browning happens evenly on the top. Yeah, and it should come, and then you sit it in the oven after it's finished for another good 10-20 minutes, just to let it cool down in the oven. And then we turn it upside down, and then turn it back upside down so that it's kind of face up, and we'll ice it. Right, so the cake is ready, and it's been cooling in there. It's risen, and it's gone down again. Nice. Okay. So this is my trick. Flip once. Flip twice.
Wow. Look at that shape.
Smells so good.
Yeah, wow.
It's just warm and it's probably okay to ice now. So we'll just stand it there to cool a little bit longer. Icing and half the matcha. I love being generous with the matcha because I just love the flavour so
That
much.
grassy, bitter flavour.
Yeah, so good. Right. And also always to counteract a bit of salt. I'm so thankful now chefs really understand. People used to think it was always weird coming to, having Thai desserts because a lot of the predominant flavors are actually salty and sweet at the same time. And now I feel like people are just catching on. Like so often now you'll see, salted, chocolate cakes or whatever. I'm like, finally, the salt's made it. Okay, so we're just going to use a tiny, tiny bit.
Wow, it's a really vibrant green, isn't it?
Yeah.
Usually that means it's a really, I guess, grassy flavour. You really get that.
It's a really good quality matcha.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like fluorescent green. Like you can already see that it's turned somewhat. And again, you don't want to put too much liquid to it because the icing sugar really kind of starts to solidify a little bit on its own.
You really get that fresh green tea smell as you whisk it. And this is from a really famous tea region in Japan, Uji.
Which you've been to.
Yes, where
Tell
it
me
has
about
the world's oldest tea shop. Yeah, and I went there and I think the family that run it, they've had it for like 27 generations. I think
Wow.
It's been around since like the 1100s.
Do you reckon like each generation has a choice in what they do? Do you think they all choose it?
I think if your family has already been running the world's oldest tea shop for like hundreds of years,
You feel compelled to keep going?
you can't really quit and become a DJ or...
Oh, they probably do that first and then go, this doesn't pay as well. You can start to see how it's just formed ribbons. So that feels relatively at a good temperature. I've made so many mistakes when it comes to icing cakes. when you're just so keen to eat it and you ice it when it's too hot, it just does not work. Patience pays. You get a nicer looking cake.
Yeah,
Not that it matters all the time.
This is a really nice glossy glaze.
Yeah, and actually if you leave it to do its thing, you'll just see kind of it just falls naturally where it wants to go, but then you obviously will distribute it evenly. It will just run because of the shape of the cake as well.
So I guess the matcha will really contrast with the ume rice mochi cake underneath.
Yeah. Do you like drips?
I don't mind.
It will naturally drip.
Yeah.
Because the icing will just work with this, the residual heat of the cake.
Nice.
Okay. I'm going to let you decorate it.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
the pressure.
I know. Here we go.
Okay, so in the center?
Don't ask me.
Wow, all right.
All right, so you see how hard it is?
Oh my gosh. I'm getting decorating stress just thinking about this.
See, you food writers, you think it's so easy.
No, it's not easy at all. I have a lot of respect for anyone who cooks for a living.
I think part of I love looking at your feeds and listening to the podcast because it's a really good way for me to keep up with what's happening on the Sydney food scene. I feel like you know it before everyone else.
Oh, well.
I think you did a good job.
Oh, thank you. I had a lot of guidance, actually. Should we try it?
Let's do it. Okay.
Wow. The glaze has set really nicely as well. Don't you want a plate as well for your
Often
slice?
when I make this cake, it never actually makes it onto the plate. It goes straight from the stand into my mouth. Is that really, truly inappropriate? But hey, cheers.
Wow, you don't even want a fork? Oh my gosh, you don't even need a fork.
This is the kind of cake that kind of stands up on its own.
Wow, I've got a 2-fork situation now. Oh my gosh. Oh, whoa, that consistency. It's very impressive.
It's like almost like a fudgy brown.
Wow. This is not what I expected. I forgot that it's got a mochi, that really glutinous,
sticky rice,
spongy, stretchy kind of center. Wow. It tastes like sticky rice.
Is it what you expected?
I love the sour, like that really light sour flourish in the mochi cake, and then the matcha really amps it up.
Yeah, and the berries too, right?
And the berries.
I really feel like this is the kind of cake where you don't really know why you like it, right? And you can't even describe what it is or how it tastes until you try it and you go, this is something I want to make again and I want to have another slice.
So thank you, Palisa, for schooling us in sour.
No, not at all. I didn't school you. You knew all this anyway. Anyway, I just wanted to point out to people cooking at home that don't be scared of using acid, like whether that is in berries, in fruit, in lemons or vinegar, wine, alcohol. It really lifts your cooking game. Yeah, and it's the perfect dance partner, really, for anything. Just use it in first, be moderate. And if it's not enough, go harder.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be, as you said, like, it doesn't have to like slap you in the face, that big kind of like, you know, face squinting kind of sour note. Like, it can be really subtle, really graceful, laid in like in this cake.
Yeah, like I said, the perfect dance partner, because, you know, the perfect dance partner really highlights your ability, right? It is there to bolster and balance and help you along, and actually it's, you know, it feels good when you eat it and it's not sitting there. And that's what I think acid does. It helps kind of just help your digestion along and helps balance all the flavors out.
Yeah, it gives it a nice lift.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Palisa, and thank you for joining us today for the Carriageworks Masterclass, brought to you in partnership with Smeg Australia. Well, let's get back and demolish this cake.
I'm dying for another bite. Thank you.
Thank you.